There's a series of allegations that parties, including regular Wine Fridays, took place at number 10 while COVID restrictions were in place. Former Conservative Minister Tobias Ellwood says the Prime Minister must lead or step aside. Ministers have called on MPs to wait until Sue Gray's investigation is complete before making a judgment. However, backbencher Andrew Bridgen said Boris Johnson should no longer lead the country.
It makes the Prime Minister's position untenable, and the constant drip out of further revelations are paralysing the Prime Minister's ability to function, and it's affecting the government's ability to function. And that makes his position untenable. We need to draw a line under it. And what we should do now, he should do the honourable thing. And for the good of the country, our Parliament and the Conservative Party, he should depart.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer says it's in the national interest now for the Conservative Party to get rid of Boris Johnson. During a speech at the Fabian Society conference, the Labour leader said the Prime Minister has lost the moral authority to lead. He also accused him of being dishonest when he claimed he had no idea that parties had taken place.
Moral authority matters in relation to enforcing the COVID rules, but we've got other massive challenges facing this country, massive challenges. We've got a Prime Minister who is absent, he's literally in hiding at the moment, and unable to lead. And so that's why I've concluded that he's got to go. And of course there's a party advantage in him going, but actually it's now in the national interest that he goes. So it's very important now that the Tory party does what it needs to do and gets rid of him.
In other news, Novak Djokovic is back in detention ahead of his visa appeal hearing. His legal team say they will argue the decision to deny him entry is irrational. That's after Australia's immigration minister warned the tennis star's views could stoke anti-vaccination sentiments. World number 6 Rafa Nadal says there are a lot of questions that need to be answered.
It's very clear that Novak Djokovic is one of the best players of the history, without a doubt. But there is no one player in history that's more important than an event. Australian Open is much more important than any player. So if he's playing, finally, okay. If he's not playing, Australian Open will be a great Australian Open, with or without him.
Islanders have been rushing to escape the impact of an undersea volcano which has erupted near Tonga. The huge explosion caused large waves to pour onto coastal areas. Tonga's Met Office said the tsunami warning was for all of the country, with nearby Fiji also issuing an alert. Lawyers for Prince Andrew want to question his accuser's husband and her psychologist as part of his civil sex case. In recently published documents, they've argued that Miss Giuffre may suffer from false memories. It follows a request from her lawyers to take a statement from Prince Andrew's former assistant. Virginia Giuffre has accused Prince Andrew of allegedly sexually assaulting her as a teenager. He denies the allegations. GBNews can confirm that more than 200 migrants have successfully crossed the English Channel today after being intercepted by officials. More than 750 individuals have successfully made the trip in the 2 weeks since the start of the year. On Friday, a Sudanese man in his 20s died after attempting to get across. Well, this is GB News. More news as it happened. You can get more on these stories by visiting our website at gbnews.uk. I'll be back at the top of the next hour. Well, looking ahead to this afternoon in the UK will be mostly cloudy with perhaps a little light rain or drizzle across the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. It should begin to brighten up across southwest England this afternoon. Largely dry weather with highs around 11 Celsius. The best of any sunshine across West Devon and Cornwall. Cloudy skies remaining across southeast England this afternoon. Some mist and fog patches lingering in places too. Feeling chilly with highs of 7 Celsius. Wales could see a few light showers across the western side of the country, drier in the east with perhaps a few glimmers of sunshine. The Midlands will be chilly with lingering fog patches, but also some sunshine too, heading towards Manchester, and it should be brighter here, but cloud persisting over the Pennines, feeling cold for many. Some spells of sunshine breaking through, though, through the mist across northeast England this afternoon, but a chilly day as temperatures struggle in some places. Highs in Newcastle reaching around 4 Celsius. Sunny spells and a few showers across northern areas of Scotland, cloudier further south with some patchy rain or drizzle in places. Temperatures around average for the time of year. The cloud will come and go across Northern Ireland, some mist and fog patches beginning to form by the end of the afternoon. Highs of around 8 Celsius in Belfast. A few showers in the north and west this evening. Elsewhere will be largely cloudy with some fog patches. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Yeah, very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM with me, Darren McCaffrey. Over the next hour, live from Downing Street as the political fallout continues from that alleged lockdown-breaking party that took place here in Downing Street in May 2020, when the rest of us were being told simply not to mix with people beyond one other outside of our households. That was clearly not the case in Downing Street. When one of the most senior civil servants invited, it seems, over 100 people to attend a party in the Downing Street garden. It's believed that up to 30 may well have attended, including the Prime Minister and his wife, Carrie Symonds, in flagrant abuse of the rules. It has led to anger in the Labour Party, some of whom are calling for the Prime Minister essentially to go. Anger too amongst the Conservative Party, many backbench MPs privately expressing the frustration that yet again here we are with them having to defend a Prime Minister who appears to have broken the rules. And that is also spilled into anger as well amongst the wider Conservative Party. We've heard from a Conservative council leader in Sunderland, Anthony Mullen, in the last hour or so, saying that it is inevitable the Prime Minister will have to go because of this. As for Downing Street, though, they are on the defensive, arguing that they were going to have to wait for the official reports by Sue Gray into what went on, not just at this party, but the many others that are alleged to have taken place in the first lockdown and also ahead of Christmas in 2020. But let's just remind ourselves of what the rules were back then, because on the same day as this party took place in Downing Street, at which dozens of Downing Street staff, including the Prime Minister's wife, attended, just before that, Oliver Dowden, the Cabinet Minister, was inside Number 10 telling us what the rules at that day and that stage were. Let's listen.
Before we begin questions from the public and from the media, I just want to remind people of the details of the next phase of our fight against coronavirus. As the Prime Minister announced this week, those who cannot work from home should now speak to their employer about going back to work. You can spend time outdoors and exercise as often as you like, and you can meet one person outside your household in an outdoor public place, provided that you stay 2 metres apart.
Well, that was Oliver Dowden speaking on that day on May 20th back in 2020. Today, though, the Labour Party were demanding answers from the government. They managed to get an urgent question in Parliament. The Prime Minister, unsurprisingly, didn't turn up. Michael Ellis, the MP and Paymaster General, stood in instead. And it was a pretty angry exchange, it must be said, between Angela Rayner, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, and Michael Ellis, trying, it must be said, to try and defend the government, while frankly saying very little. Let's have a watch.
The Minister, quite frankly, hides behind the Gray investigation. There's no need for an investigation into the simple, central question today. Did the Prime Minister attend the event in the Downing Street garden on the 20th of May 2020? It won't wash, Mr Speaker, to blame this on a few junior civil servants. The Prime Minister sets the tone.
The Prime Minister was, of course, himself affected by the consequence of a COVID-19 infection. He takes this matter very seriously, as does everyone in government. But I will say this. She asks if I have confidence in the Prime Minister's integrity and honour, and I do.
pretty sticky wicket there for Michael Ellis. What was more notable, rather than the replies, were how few Conservative MPs were sat behind him. In fact, none on the front bench at all. Many pointing out, actually, there were many more people at this party in Downing Street that were in the Commons chamber to try and give support to that Conservative minister, trying to defend the Prime Minister. Of course, that Boris Johnson will have to face the music at some stage, most notably when Prime Minister's question time is held at lunchtime tomorrow. Well, let's get a sense of what the mood is like within the Conservative Party and what the political reaction has been. Joining me in Downing Street, he's been sheltering from the rain for the last couple of minutes, is Paul Hawkins, our national reporter who joins us. Paul, as I was saying, there is quite a lot of anger, I think, and frustration amongst Conservative MPs that yet again we're here with more allegations about more parties that may well have broken rules.
Really frustrating. And you mentioned it there, Darren. Michael Ellis on the sticky wicket. I mean, if we extend the cricket metaphors, everything played with a straight bat today. Those back benches in the Commons empty. Conservative MPs really displaying their anger. We saw it publicly and privately, probably more publicly than privately, before Christmas. They were sick of the way the Owen Paterson scandal was handled. They were tired with the way that the Christmas Partygate, if we can differentiate that from this Garden Partygate, was handled. And then we had the North Shropshire by-election, the absolute thumping for the Conservatives there. So Boris Johnson, it seemed like patience was wearing thin with him. They gave him Christmas. There was a bit of a break. Boris Johnson hoping that the Conservative Party could move on, that they could focus on getting the country back on its feet, that it could sustain this wave of Omicron. But it seems like every single leak that comes out, Boris Johnson cannot escape this story. And at the moment, it's difficult to see how he can survive, 48, 72 hours, let's say, saying that that they're going to wait for the outcome of this Sue Gray investigation. Very frustrating for Conservative MPs. They do seem to be more muted, though, today than they were before Christmas.
In saying that, we can over-egg these things sometimes, can't we? And if there is any leader we do that with more than any other, is Boris Johnson, in the sense that repeatedly he's had mud chucked at him and it seems to kind of slide off. Do you get a sense that this time might be different?
Potentially. I mean, he could. Look, there's the local elections to come. Boris Johnson still, he secured that 80-seat majority in 2019. He's still considered a general election winner. Yes, he's had a thumping by-election defeat in North Shropshire. Governments do sustain that mid-term normally anyway. So he could probably write that off and say that in 2 years' time, we'll get the Conservative Party back where we want it, leading in the polls and in a decent state to fight the next general election. So it's not over for him yet, but certainly, there can't be, the patience of Conservative MPs is not limitless, and we keep hearing it's not the crises themselves, it's the way Number 10 handles them.
Labour opposition, unsurprisingly, making quite a lot of hay with this today. A sense about whether they want the Prime Minister to go or not, but also a sense that this is kind of good news for Keir Starmer in lots of ways. Yeah,
it is, yeah. I mean, still speaking to some Labour MPs, you hear that really they're 3-0 up and they should be 6-0 up, not quite capitalising on those poll leads, because when we look at the polls, we do find that the Labour Party is ahead. Keir Starmer's personal rating not that much further ahead of Boris Johnson's, if at all. So Labour ahead in the polls, Keir Starmer not so much. It'll be interesting to see how PMQs goes tomorrow. Today, that question from Angela Rayner, kind of the starter, if you will, and the main course tomorrow, PMQ. So it'll be interesting to see how he fares. I don't know if he's finished his self-isolation period or not.
I think he will
have done by then. Right, so it'll be really interesting to see how he handles tomorrow, because plenty of ammunition to throw at the Prime Minister.
When we look at the kind of fallout, as you say, from the polls, there is also a sense, you talk to pollsters about this, and we'll be doing it a little later with Ben Page from Ipsos Mori, that lots of people have already kind of baked in that the Prime Minister, they don't believe that he obeyed the rules anyway in the first place, and so in a sense that the public may not be surprised by these latest revelations.
You're saying it couldn't get any worse?
Well, maybe, yes.
I mean, I suppose the thing with Boris Johnson at the moment, there is a problem with integrity that is borne out in the polls, and perhaps you could say things couldn't get any worse for him. I guess it depends as well on the outcome of Sue Gray's investigation. Will she find out that Boris Johnson was indeed at that party, and could that spell curtains for the Prime Minister? It'll be interesting to see the outcome of that investigation, how long it takes, and as Michael Ellis mentioned in the Commons today, if the Met Police get involved and they launch a formal investigation, then Sue Gray's investigation is then put on hold. So there could be twists and turns yet to come. It'll be interesting to see how the Prime Minister bears it out.
And just very finally, Paul, we've talked about this before, haven't we? Potential leadership challenges, vote of no confidence. It does seem like we're still a while away from that. Things do change in politics very quickly. But what is your sense? I mean, there is a kind of certain mood amongst the Conservative Party, a certain strain that they're kind of a bit fed up, really.
Fed up? There's a little bit of patience left in the tank, but I don't think Conservative MPs can take it much more. It depends how many more leaks there are. I mean, we've had the Allegra Stratton video, we've had this email, we've had the picture of the Downing Street party on May the 15th that was published by The Guardian. So we've had leak after leak after leak, and every time Boris Johnson does not come out of it looking any better. So are there more leaks to come? Are there more photos? Are there more videos? We don't know. The Prime Minister just trying to tough it out by just battening down the hatches and sending out Michael Ellis today.
It's getting hard to keep track of all the alleged Downing Street do's held during lockdowns, but the latest is quite spectacular. And now there seems to be email evidence. Well, to talk about this, I'm joined by Barry Gardiner, Labour MP for Brent North. Barry, thank you for joining us. So the invite to the party was by a top official. The table outside in the Downing Street garden was laden with booze and snacks. It's said, eyewitnesses say, the PM and his wife attended. Should he resign?
Yes, I think he should. As much for the fact that he has treated the British public with contempt as anything else. What we've seen now is not just one party. We've seen a pattern of behaviour where this government and this Prime Minister have held the public in such contempt. That day, the government actually tweeted out, the Metropolitan tweeted out, that they hoped everybody was enjoying the warm weather, they could now go back to the parks and exercise, but they had to do it either on their own, with somebody from their own family, or with no more than one other person. And we find that there was Boris Johnson with one person from his own family and 98 other people. That is just so unacceptable. And it shows, I think, the way in which this Prime Minister believes he is able to behave. And I think people are fed up with it.
I should just say 98 other people were invited, but not all of them turned up.
They may not have all turned up.
How big a deal is this in a world outside Westminster, outside these TV studios? Is there a case to be made? These were people all working together. So if they went outside in the garden, they were working very hard and had a drink together, then there's no risk of spreading the disease because they all work together anyway.
No, I don't think it's the case that they all work together. Let me say the reason this is important is because it is symptomatic of the way in which this government feels that it can create rules for everyone else but not abide by themselves. And that is the way that you look at what's happened with the procurement of the PPE during the pandemic, the way they created a separate VIP channel for their mates to get literally millions of pounds of contracts. £3 billion of which was wasted on PPE that they couldn't use because it wasn't to the correct specification, because these companies had no experience of providing this kit. So it shows the way in which the government feels that it can do what it likes with impunity, and it doesn't need to take notice of you and I and everyone in this country who's trying to do the right thing.
Should the police investigate?
Well, I called for the police to investigate right at the very first party that was reported, the December party. Cressida Dick refused to do so at that time. She said they had no evidence. I'd always thought it was the police's duty to try and uncover evidence where there was a prima facie report of a crime. And I think Cressida Dick now has huge egg on her face, because what's happened is we've seen that one in December was not the only party. It was not the only way in which this government was playing fast and loose with the rules. And they should have taken it up at the time, and then this would have all come out a lot sooner, and we could get on with the business of governing this country, of dealing with the crisis in our economy, of dealing with the cost of living problems that households are now having to face.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Let's turn now to the views of a Labour MP. Steve McCabe can join us now down the line. Labour MP, of course. Welcome to the programme, Steve. First of all, what can we expect Sir Keir Starmer to be saying in Prime Minister's questions at noon today?
Well, I think he'll probably simply ask him to come clean. I think there's been too much evasion. There's been too much deception, and I think he'll say that the public are entitled to some straight answers. Boris Johnson knows if he was at this event or not. Boris Johnson knows if he broke his own rules or not. And Boris Johnson owes the public an explanation and an honest answer.
Is there anything that the Prime Minister could say today that would, in your view, ameliorate the situation for him?
Well, frankly, I find it hard to imagine what that might be. I mean, he seems to have boxed himself into a corner. He's reinforced this idea that there's one set of rules for him and his cronies and a different set for everyone else. And he's reinforced the idea that he's a man who can't be trusted.
Now, I wonder to what extent this whole affair, to some people, may seem a little historic. There are obviously huge challenges for the country right now, big problems, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's all of the associated problems to that, gas bills, inflation, and indeed how long this pandemic may drag out. I suppose there is a question as to how much of our focus should be on relitigating a situation that happened 2 years ago.
Well, these are all problems that the Prime Minister has also inflicted on the country, and perhaps if he paid more attention to detail over the years, we'd be in a better situation. But I don't think you can simply say that we'll just forget that he broke the laws that he brought in because, you know, we've got a few other issues to deal with now. I've never heard of that happening in the past. I'm not quite sure if people would be prepared to accept that. Look, I think this has moved beyond politics. My sense is it's the public who are now angry about this. They feel as if they've been cheated and lied to, and I don't think you can get away with that as if it's just a bit of party political knockabout.
Now, your party, the Labour Party, is ahead in the polls. The Tory party has taken a significant knock. There's a lot of confidence lost in the Prime Minister. Are you worried, as a Labour Party, however, that all this has come about due to unforced errors emanating from the Prime Minister himself, and potentially not all that brilliant campaigning or tactics from the Labour Party? You seem to have lucked out due to a situation of unforced errors from the Prime Minister, rather than anything you've done yourselves.
Well, there's always a view that governments lose elections, but I mean, my sense is that Labour has quite a long way to go in reassuring the public and explaining to the public exactly what Labour in government would mean. I don't think we can take too much satisfaction from the current situation at all, and I don't think that's where Keir Starmer's at. I think he is trying to map out a route to government that's about explaining to the British public what he would do, what he would tackle. I think there is some evidence on things like, obviously, the VAT cut on gas and electricity at the moment, that we are in tune with the public and the government are not.
Let's bring back in Alice Grant and Nigel, who join us outside Parliament here. Nigel Nelson, I should say. Let's start with you first, and if we can throw forward, if that's possible, what are Conservative MPs thinking about this afternoon? We know the Prime Minister was in the tea rooms trying to charm them this afternoon. What will be going through their minds over the next 48 hours, 72 hours?
Well, whether or not to get rid of him, basically, which of course is...
Is it as blunt as that, do you reckon?
Yes, it's in their gift to do that. Now, the way I understand it from the Tory MPs I was talking to immediately after Prime Minister's questions is they're happy to wait and see what Sue Gray actually says before taking the next move. So the quicker that she reports, the better. But there are a number of them who are talking about putting letters of no confidence in. The difficulty with that one is they've got to get the timing right. They need to, they need 54 letters to go in to get a confidence vote. What happens after that? The vote takes place, and more than half of Tory MPs have to pass that. Theresa May faced one, for instance, and got away with it.
And then, interestingly, she was safe in her job for 12 months, because once one has happened...
Exactly the point. That's exactly the point. So the timing is right, that Boris could actually survive another year if they get the numbers wrong. So there's an awful lot of number collecting going on. And the other...
And so just and then you would think that would be a little too late ahead of an election to start a leadership race.
Well, not really. I mean, an election is at earliest about 2 years away. So you've still got plenty of time to get somebody new in. And look what happened with John Major. You got John Major in after Maggie Thatcher, and it looked like a new government. He went on to win the election.
Alice, you know, we've heard this, haven't we, these stories over the last couple of days of people remembering what happened, particularly those who've been through very traumatic events like watching loved ones die over Zoom or not being able to visit elderly relatives in care homes. It does seem to have resonated with the public quite a lot, this story.
Yes, absolutely, and I think it's especially alarming when you consider that only 9 days before Boris broke these rules, legislation which he himself imposed very rigorously on the public, the fines increased for the members of the public who flaunted any regulations. So I don't know if there's any appetite for a new leadership race and contest at the moment. I wonder who would be the one to replace Boris, and I'm not sure. But
it is interesting, isn't it, that MPs will be looking at those mailbags and their emails, because they are often on the front line of public opinion. Forget about pollsters, they often get to gauge public opinion first.
Yes, I think this definitely has stirred up a lot of rage within the public, but I also think there are other issues which I'm sure a lot of the British public are focused on at the moment. Rising energy bills being one of them, NHS crisis, staffing crisis in social care. There's a lot of issues right now at the moment, and whilst Boris's public life is often made into a scandal every once in a while, I think that perhaps focus should also be on other very much important issues.
And we should just say in the last couple of minutes, Douglas Ross, who is the Conservative leader in Scotland, has now called on the Prime Minister to resign. Now, we know he's been pretty outspoken about Boris Johnson's behaviour in the past. He was certainly critical in the last couple of days, but it is notable that he is calling on the Prime Minister to resign, certainly the first senior Conservative to do that. We know, obviously, the situation politically in Scotland is different. Boris Johnson is not a popular political figure north of the border, but be in no doubt that is still a very significant moment. Nigel, bring you back in on that. You know, this is a very senior Conservative, the leader in Scotland, now calling on his leader, the leader of the government here in Westminster, to go.
Yeah, it is serious. I think you might find other people will start coming out of the woodwork and doing the same thing. Because there is this mood at the moment that they would be better off with a different Prime Minister. Now, obviously, always leadership elections become a bit of a distraction. But then we got rid of the last Prime Minister, Theresa May, in the middle of Brexit, which was pretty important. The reason being they thought there was someone better to lead Britain out of Brexit. Now Tory MPs are thinking there's someone better to lead us out of the pandemic.
And so people have often written off Boris Johnson in the past. They've suggested his political career has been over many times before, and it's not happened. And there is a sense that in the heat of the moment, commentators and MPs may get carried away with thinking this is the end, and actually that he could carry on, see this out. He is still quite popular with a large section of the public.
Yes, I think certainly Labour seem to be in this kind of frenzy in which they want to take advantage of the opportunity to demand Boris's resignation. But I think ultimately this is perhaps something that he will survive. There have been many scandals before like this. I just hope that this is an opportunity for him to finally realise and actually enact on the fact that these restrictions which he imposed himself were ridiculous and futile in so many ways. And instead of telling this about to the resignation, leadership, perhaps new Prime Minister issue, I think this should actually instead shed light on these restrictions which are still being imposed on us. Only recently we were told to avoid meeting our friends and our family during Christmas, whereas obviously now we know that in Downing Street there have been parties since 2020, since May, all throughout and including Christmas. So I hope instead that this is an opportunity in which we may seriously look at the COVID regulations and assess whether they're actually pantomime and theatre.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Dan Wootton, join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Jack and I were both elected to Parliament in 2010. He was a kind and generous colleague and friend, and I feel lucky to have known him. Of course, I was upset to learn about his sudden death on Friday. Our next guest, Ellie Reeves MP, has known Jack for much longer, before either of them were in Parliament. She's the Shadow Justice Minister and Labour MP for Lewisham West and Penge, and she joins us now from her constituency. Ellie, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you.
And you, Gloria.
You have known Jack for a long time, since before you were a Member of Parliament. Just tell us in your own words what he was like.
Well, I first met Jack as a young trade union lawyer, which was my career before entering Parliament, probably about 16 years ago now. And I was working on a big industrial dispute at Heathrow Airport. A large number of low-paid workers working for Gate Gourmet had just been sacked, and we were leading the campaign to get them reinstated. And Jack was just an absolute tower of knowledge and strength. You know, of course, he led the Grumwick strikes back in the 70s, and he just provided so much energy and advice and support. And then a few years later, I was elected to Labour Party's National Executive Committee, and Jack served on the NEC as Treasurer. And again, Jack was someone who was so willing to give up his time to offer advice, support and friendship. And he just will be hugely missed, both inside Parliament, but also in the wider Labour and trade union movement.
He was a real Labour stalwart, a firebrand, but actually he was liked by colleagues across the House, wasn't he?
He was, and you know, he was a real firebrand. You know, I can't really remember, you know, any big industrial issue over the past sort of during my time of being involved in the movement that had not been on the forefront of, whether it was rights for agency workers, Gangmasters Licensing Authority, compensation for victims of asbestos exposure. Jack was always there, but equally he commanded respect across the whole House. I think, you know, Jack's ability to, you know, argue at any point, but with such passion and intellect, meant that he was hugely respected by everyone that met him. And, you know, the thing is with Jack, you know, first and foremost, he was a fantastic family man as well. You know, whenever I saw Jack in the tea room, he'd always ask after my children, and his grandchildren are similar ages to my children. So we'd often just have a chat about, you know, what his grandkids were up to, what my children were up to, and that friendliness, that, you know, always wanting just to, you know, see how you were doing is something that I think everyone will always remember about Jack.
A tribute, Ellie. Will MPs across Parliament be able to pay tribute to him in Parliament? His death was so sudden.
Yeah, and I know that MPs will want to pay tribute to Jack in Parliament. I think all of our thoughts at the moment are with Harriet Harman, and respect her issues in relation to when she would want that to happen. So I'm sure we will pay tribute, but I think that needs to be at a time that Harriet is comfortable with. Harriet's the mother of the house, and I think our thoughts are all with Harriet at this time.
Absolutely. Final question, if I may, on the news of the day. The government are about to get tough on developers, we read, to help those who have unsafe homes through the sort of cladding that caused Grenfell. Labour's reactions to those plans, which we'll be hearing more about this afternoon from Michael Gove.
Well, look, we welcome measures to tackle this crisis, but the reality is that the tragedy of Grenfell was 4.5 years ago. We've had 17 statements from the government since then, and actually, we'll listen to the detail, but the reality is, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing in the announcements today about remedial work that isn't related to cladding, like fire breaks and so on. And also, it's unclear where where the money will come from if the developers won't pay out, and also what is the time frame from this. I've got constituents living in a block in my constituency where for the last 4.5 years they've been in limbo, stuck in homes that they're unable to sell or mortgage, paying for a waking watch and facing bills of 30,000 plus. So my worry is that the measures today are too little and too late for a lot of people.
Well, let's now return, though, to a top story. Of course, Partygate, allegations of that party in the Downing Street garden in May of last year. Let's get a sense of what the public mood is out there and the wider mood when it comes to the Conservative Party and the government and politics more generally. Joining me now is Ben Page. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Ipsos and joins me down the line. Very good afternoon to you, Ben. First of all, there's no substantial polling to date when it comes to this very specific latest news on the events that may well have taken place here in Downing Street in May 2020. But what has the mood to date been with the public when it comes to the multiple parties that we've seen either in Downing Street or in other government departments?
I think all of this is corrosive for the government, and what it's showing is that that it appears that there's one rule for them and another rule for everybody else. And that was, it started with things like the Barnard Castle incident with Dominic Cummings, who's now quite happy to throw mud at the government, but he was, part of that to start with. It all erodes trust and confidence in the government. And although they aren't suffering that badly for a party in the midterms, Boris Johnson's personal ratings have taken a dive. And actually, despite Keir Starmer's steady and sometimes slightly charisma-less persona, he's now seen as more likely to make the best Prime Minister than the Prime Minister. And that's the first time in a long time that a Labour leader has bettered a Conservative leader. It's years and years since the positions on that have been reversed between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. And nearly all of that is self-inflicted. And then finally, one of the things that we measure is just people's spontaneous concerns about what's going on in the country. And partly because of the events around Downing Street over the last 3 or 4 months, we now have more people than at any point in recent years saying the biggest problem in this country is just its politicians generally. And it's as high or as higher than it was when there was the Brexit deadlock in Parliament. So it is starting to cut through. It's not down and out for Boris Johnson, but he really is going to have to get a grip.
So there is a sense then, is there, Ben, that the Labour Party, as you say, years of struggling in the polls, seem to be capitalising on this?
Yes, they're in the lead, up to 10 points in the lead. If you average the polls during December, the polls went from the Conservatives having clear leads in October to being neck and neck across the month of November. And then by December, the average for December gave Labour a clear lead on average. but they're not. It's not down and out, because Labour face a real uphill struggle at the next general election. I mean, Labour, remember, in 2012 got 12 percentage points clear of the government of the day, led by David Cameron, and went on to lose the 2015 general election. And the challenge facing Keir Starmer against whoever they're facing in 2024 or whenever the general election comes will be even harder than what Labour were facing in 2015. But nevertheless, it is a pretty extraordinary series of events.
And in saying that, Ben, we're a long way off this clearly yet, though the rumour will at Westminster, as you well know, never ends. If there was to be a challenge, and I put a big emphasis on the word if, to Boris Johnson's leadership, who are the likely runners and riders that seem popular with the public but also with the Conservative membership? Maybe the occupant next door, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor.
Well, Rishi Sunak has been for a long time the most popular politician in Britain, with ratings well ahead of the Prime Minister. And of course, that's in part because he's been doling out a huge amount of cash and keeping people in work. His ratings have been drifting down, but he remains among the electorate as a whole more popular than the Prime Minister. Inside the Conservative Party, he doesn't do badly. He's got his rival in the Foreign Office, Liz Truss. And I think it's always very difficult to speculate on these things, because it never seems to be the favourite or the most visible who necessarily ends up as the leader in these competitions. But certainly Rishi Sunak scores better than the Prime Minister again. And you never know quite what will happen when they actually get the job, if and when they do, So, but certainly there is competition. There are certainly people testing the waters. The Conservative Party is a much meaner, leaner machine than the Labour Party when it comes to getting rid of people they think are now a problem. They don't hang around. And so, we'll see. But Boris Johnson has got away with all sorts of things in the past. But it is this continual drip, drip, drip of unforced errors that seems to be really starting to cut through now. And the fact that the public are starting just to complain about politicians generally, when we don't even ask them about politicians, is quite marked.
Today is Less Survivable Cancer Awareness Day. Less survivable cancers make up a quarter of cancer cases in the UK. Pancreatic cancer is one of the most deadly cancers. And today, I'm joined by Bryony Thomas, who was diagnosed in 2019, told that her life expectancy was just 12 weeks. Bryony has beaten the odds and now is campaigning with her MP, Siobhan Bailey, to raise awareness. I'm delighted to welcome both to the show today. Siobhan, I'm going to start with you. Tell me how you first started working with Bryony.
So Pancreatic Cancer UK did a campaign day and involved MPs from across the House to try and tell us about a drug called PERT, which is not given out enough as far as we're concerned for people who are suffering from pancreatic cancer or who have survived it. So they wanted to raise awareness, and within that they brought me in touch with my constituent Bryony, who, as you will see in a moment, is a complete inspiration. I was totally gripped by her story to a point where I didn't want to stop the conversation. So on a personal level, Bryony and I are a similar age. We're mums, and I had actually no idea. I'd always thought that pancreatic cancer was very much an older person's issue. So that really upset me, and I started investigating. And then on a professional level, this is a cancer it's known as the silent cancer. There hasn't been improvement in survival rates for 40 years. So I've raised the issue in the House with the leader of the House, Jacob Rees-Mogg. He actually encouraged us to campaign on this, so that's what we're doing.
Good. Bryony, tell me about the moment that you were diagnosed in 2019 and how that conversation went about your prognosis.
Yeah, well, like half of pancreatic cancer patients, I ended up being diagnosed on acute admission to hospital, even though I'd been going to see my GP with vague symptoms for 5 years. On the day that I was diagnosed, I'd been there for 4 days. I was going increasingly yellow, looked like Marge Simpson, trying to keep up my sense of humour. And the doctor came in with 2 women I didn't recognise. One had a purple uniform on, and my stomach sank. My husband was with them, and Dr. Griffiths says, we've found a mass in your pancreas. we think it's cancer and it might be operable. And it was the word might. Right. And I swore and I said, that's the one you don't want, isn't it? Yeah. And my husband and I looked at each other, and the thing is, we weren't surprised. You know, the Spike Milligan, I told you I was ill. I told you I was ill. You know, for 5 years, I'd been to my GP with fatigue, with bloating, with kind of just low-level lethargy and lack of vitality, all sorts of these small issues that didn't get added up into cancer.
Goodness me, goodness me. The good news is you are still here.
Yes.
Tell us why.
Well, I'm one of the only 1 in 10 people who are offered potentially curative surgery. By the time most people get to the point of being diagnosed, it's too late. And there is a reason for that. This was the size of my tumour when I was operated on.
Walnut.
A walnut. And this is, if this were on your body, you'd feel it. When it's in your body, you don't.
Right.
This would have been there for nearly 7 years before I was diagnosed. And so because you can't feel it, you need to be alert to small symptoms, things like looking into the toilet. You can't feel your breasts, you can't feel it on your testes. What you can do is look in the toilet and understand what your poo should look like.
Right. What are the warning signs?
Pale, floating poo.
Right.
So peanut butter coloured or lighter,
right,
you've got a problem. Doesn't flush away, you've got a problem. And so if that happens regularly and for more than 2 weeks, see your doctor, and if it persists, you persist too.
What we found is, unfortunately, even some doctors don't like to talk about poo. They'll talk about sort of tummy troubles or stool, and and actually language that doesn't really get to the nub of the issue or ask the right questions. I'm actually perfect MP for Bryony. I've got a toddler. When you have a baby, you're taught to look at wheeze and poos, and actually it's an indication of health. But as we grow up, that isn't. So it's going to be part of the awareness raising. It might be uncomfortable for some people, but it is going to be part of what Bryony is trying to achieve with telling people about the symptoms.
Tell us about what's in that.
What's in the pot? So this is PERT. This is pancreatic enzyme replacement treatment.
Never heard of it.
And if I don't take this every day, I will waste away. This is what I take every day. It's around 60 tablets every single day. And without that, I can't process fat and I can't process protein, and I would waste away.
You take how many?
About 60 tablets every day.
60 tablets?
Depending on what I'm eating.
Really?
And this is only diagnosed to half of pancreatic patients.
I see them just there. I can see them on the screen. So it's to half of pancreatic?
Yes.
Why?
Well, if you are operable, like me, then you end up with a specialist centre. You end up getting the right help, you get dietetic support. Usually it's inconsistent across the country. If you're not operable, often you don't end up with a specialist, you're not prescribed what you need, and inoperable patients not prescribed with this will mean they can't be more than 20 minutes away from a toilet. They can't go out for fear of soiling themselves. This is really distressing, and if that is palliative care, when we're trying to give people the dignity in dying, is there anything more indignant than, what more indignity can you have than making someone not have the medication that means that they don't soil themselves?
Bryony, I just want to say, before I go to Siobhan, I can completely see why Siobhan said that she could have listened to you and continued the conversation. I'm hanging off your every word. You have a brilliant way of communicating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Siobhan, how are we going to get everyone who needs it to get this film?
Obviously, Bryony is just a natural asset in terms of media, and we're going to be doing quite a big awareness-raising campaign. We'll be seeking a debate in Parliament, I'm really at the beginning of the discussions with ministers about this, because I've got a lot more investigation to do to understand why we haven't had this improvement on survival rates, to understand why, when there are 28 people a day dying of pancreatic cancer and 31 people a day dying of breast cancer, it's breast cancer that is always talked about. It's the research funding that's going into that, and not that I would want to take that away. That isn't the case. So research funding, it's awareness, it's education. From schools upwards, whether there can be this support package for people with the cancer, and also when they've survived it. And so, I think there are some guidelines in terms of the NICE guidelines already in place. Bryony believes, Pancreatic Cancer UK believes that can be improved. So I'll be working with the ministers to see what we can do. But I'm really encouraged, and I'm very, very grateful to Bryony and her family for giving this time. And I imagine you've got an awful lot to do in your life, and you didn't expect to be doing this, but it's very helpful for others.
You got a good advocate there.
Absolutely, we'll be making good use.
But it's interesting, isn't it? It does demonstrate why some people who are watching this will think if they've got a problem in their life or an issue that they want to raise, they probably wouldn't think about getting involved with their MP. But it can really work, can't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I had a post in a patient group this morning with someone who has yet again had their Whipple cancelled, their potentially curative operation cancelled during these, very difficult times. This is the third time it's been moved or postponed. And I said, have you contacted your MP? And it hadn't occurred to them to do so. And so, just as I say, go to your doctor, go to your doctor, go to your MP, go to your MP. These people are there to help you if you ask.
Yeah. Yes, very.
And grateful to GBNews for doing things like this, because it's mainly negative stuff about politicians, but actually this is our day job and trying to help.
Absolutely, it is, and I think that's why I wanted to do it, because people don't see the constituency work that actually is much more fulfilling than anything you can do in Parliament, in my view. Now, Bryony, you've got a little girl.
I do.
Every day is precious. You're now rebuilding your life and your business. Tell me about today.
I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she's hoping to share the clip with her friends. Yes, life and business, we've moved to Stroud. Now Siobhan is my MP, and my business, I was saying to Siobhan, just probably a month on from where I was in December 2019, and next week we are starting to develop software in my business, which I'm really excited about.
That is wonderful. Where next works for you in terms of the campaign?
So for me in the campaign, I will be setting up a campaign called Clue in the Loo. And yes, you can hashtag Clue in the Loo. I'm currently setting up the website and gaining support for getting people to understand that checking their breasts, checking their testes and checking the toilet is important.
You're amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, looking ahead to this afternoon, in the UK will be mostly cloudy with perhaps a little light rain or drizzle across the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. It should begin to brighten up across southwest England this afternoon. Largely dry weather with highs around 11 Celsius, the best of any sunshine across West Devon and Cornwall. Cloudy skies remaining across southeast England this afternoon. Some mist and fog patches lingering in places too. Feeling chilly with highs of 7 Celsius. Wales could see a few light showers across the western side of the country, drier in the east with perhaps a few glimmers of sunshine. The Midlands will be chilly with lingering fog patches, but also some sunshine too, heading towards Manchester, and it should be brighter here, but cloud persisting over the Pennines, feeling cold for many. Some spells of sunshine breaking through, though, through the mist across northeast England this afternoon, but a chilly day as temperatures struggle in some places. Highs in Newcastle reaching around 4 Celsius.